Thank you all. I wanted to share something because I think, you know, works of art can really inspire us, especially when they hit you when you're young. And there was a writer that I really, really liked, a lady named Ursula K. Le Guin. Um, she wrote a lot of science fiction, fantasy stuff. But like Jules Verne said, all speculative fiction and all fantastical fiction is just based on the human condition. And it's all historical. It just, sometimes you might see dragons instead of whatever is the biggest threat, right? Well, we're going to talk about the biggest threats, right, in this meeting. So I wanted to share, this is a truncated version of a short story that she wrote called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. And with the clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival of summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The ringing of the boats in the harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. It was joyous. How is one to tell about joy? How to describe the citizens of Omelas? A child of 9 or 10 sits at the edge of the crowd alone, playing on a wooden flute. People pause to listen, and they smile, but they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them. His dark eyes are wholly wrapped in the sweet thing magic of the tune. He finishes and slowly lowers his hands, holding that wooden flute, as if that little private silence were the signal. All at once, a trumpet sounds from the pavilion near the starting line of the race. It was imperious, melancholy, and piercing. The festival of summer had begun. Now, do you believe? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. In a basement, under the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, secondhand from a cobweb window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. And the room is about 3 paces long and about 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. And in that room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but actually is nearly 10. It is feeble-minded at this point. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. It sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It's afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes. But it knows the mops are still standing there. And the door is locked and nobody will come. The door is always locked and nobody ever comes, except that sometimes, and the child has no understanding of time or interval, sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close, but peer in with frightened, disgusted eyes. The food bowl and the water jug are hastily filled. The door is locked, and the eyes disappear. The people at the door never say anything, but the child, who's not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice, sometimes speaks. I will be good, it says. Please let me out. I will be good. But they never answer. The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, but now only makes a kind of whining and speaks less and less often. It is so thin there are no calves to its legs, and its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day, and it is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mass of festered sores as it sits in its own excrement continually. Now they all know it is there. All the people of Omelis. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it has to be there. Some of them understand why and some do not, but they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. Often the young people go home in tears or in tearless rage when they've seen the child and face this terrible paradox. Their tears at the bitter justice dry when they perceive the terrible justice of their reality and to accept it. Yet it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity, and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of that splendor of their lives. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know that they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child and their knowledge of its existence, that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of that child that they are so gentle with their children. They know that if the wretched one were not there sniveling in the dark, the other one, that flute player, could make no joyful music as young writers line up in beauty for their race in the sunlight in the first morning of summer. Now, do you believe them? Are they not more credible? But there's one more thing to tell, and it's quite incredible. At times, one of the adolescent boys or girls who go see the child does not go home to weep or rage, and does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes also a man or woman much older falls silent for a day or two and then leaves home. Those people go out into the street and walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walk straight out of the city of Omelis, through those beautiful gates. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Each alone, they go west or north towards the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelis. They walk ahead into the darkness and they don't come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I can't describe it at all. It's possible it does not exist, but they seem to know where they're going, the ones who walk away from Omelis. I hope that tells you a little bit about what prompted me to start thinking in these terms of how the suffering of one person is the suffering of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. You always have the most thought-provoking reflections. Thank you so much. And now I think I hand it over to Steve. You put in an email that you would like to kind of moderate this meeting, so I'll hand it to you, this presentation.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much. Rick, thank you. Would you put a link in the chat, if you can, of that extraordinary story, setting the tone for today's program? June is anti-torture month. People across the country are organizing to rise up once again and on a continuing basis against the torture in the United States and the torture around the world. We've gathered with us today two good friends of ICUJP. I say to everyone on this screen, if this is your first time or continuously, you are all card-carrying members of ICUJP. So please join us every Friday morning. sometimes with our friends, we don't take the moment to remind us of their biographies and what brings them to this work. So we are joined by Reverend Ron Stieff, an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and executive director of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, which now has more than 325 religious organizations gathered together committed to ending US-sponsored torture. Ron is a national leader and faith strategist on ending CIA torture and ending the torture of solitary confinement in the United States prisons. And we're joined by our very good friend and colleague, Robert Corsini, who is owner of Videocratic Media, Inc., has 30 years of experience producing and directing documentary content for features, specials, and a wide range of entertainment projects. Since its founding in 2014, soon to be 10 years, Videocratic Media has embarked on a wide range of documentary and entertainment projects, including feature documentaries on genocide and anti-Semitism, disability rights, and grassroots peacemaking in Israel and Palestine. Today, Ron will kick off our program, putting this entire month in the context of anti-torture work most broadly. Then we'll turn to Robert Corsini, who has produced a series of extraordinary film clips based on ICUJP's closed Guantanamo work. We'll have a little bit of a conversation among the panelists and save a lot of time for your questions and answers. So let's turn promptly to Ron. Thank you for being here, Ron.
Thanks, Steve, and it's great to be here with each one of you. I do want to give you some updates on what NEARCAT has been up to. I know a number of you are on our email list and the email list of some of the national organizations that you represent the state manifestations of, AFSC and others. So I wanted to just, for this Torture Awareness Month presentation, give you the overview of kind of some of our real successes and progress of where we're at. And I will start it with the voice of a solitary survivor.
As a society, we value community, public safety, and even second chances. Yet, across the United States, there are countless people who are being subjected to the torture of solitary confinement. And although many have not survived such dehumanizing conditions, for those who do, they have lived long enough to tell their truth, share their journeys of resilience, and more importantly, to challenge our moral compass. Here's what they had to say.
My name is Joseph De La Luz. I'm a credible messenger and a solitary survivor. I deserve to be rehabilitated for whatever it is that I've done. I deserve to grow as a person and learn to not do that again. You know what I mean? I have the right to so much other stuff than be locked in a cage and not know any better, not ever be taught any better, you know? I've seen people go to solitary for things as little as handing other people stuff, having too many cigarettes in their pockets. I've seen people go to solitary for talking back. I've seen people go to solitary for not having their shirt tucked in. I've seen people go to solitary for not having the right shoes in the gym. I've seen people go to solitary for taking too much food or asking for more food or attempting to exchange food. I've seen people go to solitary for storing food. Storing the wrong food, I guess they would call it, like for storing slices of bread, where you can't have slices of bread, but you could buy bread on commissary. I've seen people go to the box for a lot of stuff, bro. people don't know that they treat you like shit. I know they can't say that, but people don't know that like you stripped of all your rights. People don't know that they treat you like cattle. People don't know that they refer to you not by your name but by a number. People don't know that the closer it is to getting home, the harder it is to get home. People don't know a lot of things, bro. I don't know. My life today. Today I'm happy, you know, I'm free. I like to share my experiences. I like to help people as much as I possibly can. I like to enjoy my freedom.
I've done a number of things. NEARCAT has a real priority to work with the survivors of solitary confinement, and this is part of a 30 short film series where we interviewed solitary survivors, not just to talk about what happened inside solitary, but kind of where they are now, what it feels like to be out. I don't know how long he was in solitary actually, but he and I have, we were at the Catholic Social Ministry gathering in Washington, D.C. for 3 days. And it's where all the Catholic justice advocates from around the country meet once a year. The bishops convene them. And Joseph had a line of young people all 3 days standing there wanting to talk to him about hearing about his experience and what is this all about and what's happening to people in solitary confinement. And NEARCAT does those educational programs around the country with people like Joseph. We took a hit on the in-person stuff during COVID, but we're back to it now. Joseph is one of, and so on the torture of solitary survivor, solitary confinement, I just want to honor people like Joseph who are putting their stories out there. Like I said, NEARCAT has 30 of them, and we've been slowly releasing them. The first one was released by USA Today less than a year ago. And most recently, Joseph's story was actually part of a program that John Oliver did. I don't know if anybody saw it on John Oliver's Last Week Tonight show on HBO. Joseph's story was on there, and the story was on there to let people know that the people that are in solitary confinement are, number one, real human beings, just like you and me, but number two, they're not the people who are the worst of the worst. And we know this from Guantanamo and other situations. People are in these situations of confinement for very small, very little things, and in fact, for nothing in many cases. So this is not where we keep, the people that are the murderers and the rapists and everything else like folks believe. So that was a key part of the John Oliver segment. We worked with Oliver's team on that. He's got a wonderful team. And so far, that segment of Last Week Tonight, which you can see on his YouTube channel, it aired in April on John Oliver's YouTube channel. It has 3.5 million views at this point. So I guess the first thing I'll say is that we are working hard to promote and get the word out about what is happening with solitary confinement in this country. I'm going to say a few things about what we're doing to try to end it. The Unlock the Box campaign, which we work very closely with, has just released a study that for the first time adds up everybody who's in solitary in jails, in state facilities, and in federal facilities. We've been basically working with incomplete information. When you hear the number of 60 to 80,000 people that are in solitary confinement, that's kind of, if you work in this area, those are sort of the standard numbers that have been used. We have documented with Bureau of Justice Statistics and other sources through an investigative journalism operation called Solitary Watch. We have documented that there are 122,000 people in solitary confinement inside this country right now. It's shocking because it's almost double the number that has been used for years. Because that number was done, basically the only thing we had was self-reporting by the state prison systems, and then trying to extrapolate from that. And we all know what happens when prisons self-report. So, despite some tremendous successes that we have and are having, for example, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey have all within the last 4 years ended long-term solitary confinement by law in their states. And of course, now the battle is to get them to end that. We have had some successes. You think about the New York, for example, before our law passed, there were 1,800 people in solitary confinement in New York. Now it's down to almost 400 people. So because of our advocacy against torture, our collective advocacy, where faith, civil rights folks have all banded together in New York, we have reduced the number of people inside those little boxes by 1,400 people, where Joseph served his time. When you think about states like North Dakota, Delaware, Colorado, they've significantly reduced their solitary confinement, in some cases cutting it in half, by taking action at the administrative level, not waiting for their state legislatures to act. And then, of course, we have California, where, as you all know, the Center for Constitutional Rights lawsuit, which we're now actually celebrating the 10th anniversary of the hunger strikes that precipitated that lawsuit. That lawsuit cut the numbers in solitary confinement at Pelican Bay, which was somewhere around 10,000, down to about 3,500. So there are now 6,500 people less in solitary confinement in the state of California as a result of our citizen action, our action together to end torture. So, you know, despite the number being larger, it is important for us to know that our advocacy is making a huge difference around the country. And I've sat in on corrections, meetings with corrections, where they're saying, look, folks know so much about solitary confinement right now and that it's torture that we've got to be doing something here, because if it gets down to lawsuits, we're never, ever going to find a jury that's going to rule in our favor against somebody who's been in solitary confinement for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So that's kind of a bad news, good news report, but our activism is really working. I want to point you, and I hope you all are working at, I don't know who on this call is working on the California Mandela Act on solitary confinement. Last year, it passed in the California state legislature. It's a very comprehensive bill that covers all facilities in California that are under state or local jurisdiction that would effectively end long-term solitary confinement in the state. It passed last year. The governor, with no backbone at all, thinking that he might want to pretty himself up for a run at the national presidency. My words, not other people's words, but I'm going to be a little bit more critical. I'll use the clergy caller exception on this one, I guess, and call it what I think it is. He vetoed it. He vetoed it after the California legislature passed it. So now there's another run at it. The Assembly has passed it with a veto-proof majority, thanks to the work of the activists that are working with NERCAT and so many others, and I'm sure some of you. And it is now at the Senate. And if there's anything that you can do now, it is to contact your state senators to let them know that now is the time for the state Senate to pass again, but hopefully even this time with a veto-proof majority, to pass the California Mandela Act on solitary confinement, which will make a tremendous difference to how the California prison system is being run. The last thing I'll say about solitary is we hope for about a year, we've been working on a very comprehensive bill that would cover federal prisons and would also provide incentives for states to reform solitary confinement. We are hoping that in the next 3 weeks, we will be introducing that bill in Washington, D.C. through its chief sponsor, Representative Cori Bush. It is the most comprehensive piece of legislation that has ever been written on ending solitary confinement at the state or the federal level. It is one of those things that is a watermark for where we need to go, that's been done in consultation with faith leaders, activists, lawyers, survivors themselves. And look, we know how hard it is to move legislation in Washington at any time, especially now. But we are going to be entering a period as soon as this gets introduced where over 150 national organizations have signed on to this, and some regional organizations. And I think ICUJP may be signed on, but I'll make sure you get it so that you can, because we are going to be entering a period where we are going to be putting it to our members of Congress about whether or not they would put their name and sign in the House side, whether they would put their name on this and sign on to finally addressing solitary confinement in the federal prison system and trying to end it. So that's something that I hope is going to be coming up. I know we're going to be turning to Guantanamo, and I'm really excited to see a preview of Robert's film today. I know how hard you've been working on that, Robert. We're ready to get it out at NEARCAT when it's released and make sure folks have a chance to see it. I will say that one thing on Monday, which is the International Day of Support of Victims of Torture that the UN does, on Monday, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Freedom is going to be releasing her report on their recent visit to Guantanamo. We had a chance to speak with the Special Rapporteur, Ms. Fiona Nialayan. She's Irish. I probably really did a bad job of saying her name, but, and she's here in the United States, but we had a chance to speak with them, with their team before they went to Guantanamo, where they were able to interview detainees. So on Monday at 1 o'clock, she is releasing their report, and it is going to be a call for global cooperation on getting Guantanamo closed once and for all, ending the horror story that those like Mansour and others have endured, and ending the horror story that really this nation and the world has endured, as this has stayed open now for more than 20 years without being closed. So look for that report. There's a press conference at the UN Monday at 1 o'clock, and you'll be seeing the report shortly thereafter. We hope to blast it out far and wide, and I hope you all can do the same. All right, I'm going to turn it over. I'll put a couple of links. I'll put a link to the two studies and to the UN study and the solitary watch study. But thanks again, everybody. It's great to see you, and I think we'll turn it back to Steve for the rest of the program now.
Thank you, Ron, for everything you do every single day. I just, with Robert's indulgence, after Robert finishes the presentation of his clips, Mansour, fair notice, Mansour is a guest today, but the notion that we have a former Guantanamo detainee with us cannot be overlooked. So when Robert finishes his presentation, Mansour, would you take a few minutes and frankly, you deserve an entire program, and we may invite you back for that. But take a few minutes, tell us about your work, your book, and your activism just after Robert finishes. Okay, Mansour?
Yeah, my pleasure.
Wonderful. Robert, please go right ahead.
Okay, I will step in here, and basically just what this piece has become is these projects tend to have a life of their own once you kind of get into the nitty-gritty. It started initially when the January 11th event at the federal building was being created. Steve Rohde asked me if we could film it, and then was able to obtain a small grant from Ron to help facilitate all this. In the process of this, I'll just say this, and then I'll let the video speak for itself. I said to Steve, and I think it's really critical that we've been organizing around this issue for so many years, but rarely do we get the direct messages from the people who are impacted, such as Mansour. So that motivated me to make some contacts, and was able to contact Mansour directly. Also, another person, Ahmed Arashidi, is also featured in this. So these two voices are the primary detainee voices in the project to this point. And I will let this video run for itself because it says a lot. So I'm gonna set this up.
John,
former Guantanamo detainee. I was detained at Guantanamo for around 15 years, tortured in the black site and so on. I was sold to the CIA in Afghanistan. George W. Bush, Trump, Ron DeSantis, and those kind of people don't abide by any law or don't respect the human rights. Next month is going to be the 21st anniversary of the opening of Guantanamo. Guantanamo has become a symbol of injustice, lawlessness, abuse of power, and indefinite detention. And it is the biggest case in the 21st century, basically. Why? Because, it was created by the United States, the country that, claimed sponsor human rights, freedom, equality, and democracy, and so on. And that black hole is still there, outside of the humanity, outside of the justice system.
There's so many aspects to how we can dig deep on the issue of Guantanamo. It's been 21 years, and something that is illegal, unlawful, despite all the cries for freedom, cry for justice, and it's still going on. People who believe in justice and people who believe in the democracy and the rule of law around the world. I mean, this is not something to do with people of Guantanamo, people who did wear a orange jumpsuit and their families. This is not something to do with just the ex-prisoners of Guantanamo or people who are still there. This is something to do with everybody who believes in justice, everybody who believes in the rule of law, and everybody who believes in human rights.
The enduring symbol of the war on terror is Guantanamo prison. It was open. There were 779 detainees went through that place, many of whom had been in secret prisons. It is the symbol of torture and the symbol of the lack of respect that the United States has for human rights. So even as early as last year,
you know, this remnant of the war on terror. And believe me, the war on terror is not over at all, but there's at least some rules now. There weren't then. And so the remnant is still sitting in Guantanamo with the 35 men who are there. And as recent as last year, both China and Russia, when the United States challenged them on their human rights abuses, all they have to do is say, well, what about you? You still have people sitting in Guantanamo. You haven't even closed that place. Nobody has any rights. Nobody's gone to trial. You're holding people in detention without any hope of getting out. So why are you talking to us about human rights? And this is just one of the many horrible consequences of how we kind of threw the rule of law out, started to set some new rules that aren't what we would normally think of when we think of how the United States is supposed to operate in the world.
I'm an Anglo-American lawyer. I spent 25 years doing death penalty work in the Deep South in Atlanta and New Orleans. And when all of this came up in late 2001, early 2002, I have to say it just struck me as being identical to death penalty issues, that we pick on a small group of people here, a group of Muslim men, to blame for a massive problem here. Instead of crime in America, it's terrorism. I brought the very first case against Guantanamo with a couple of other folk, Joe Margulis and Michael Ratner from CCR, back on February the 19th, 2002. And it's been a long battle. I didn't think, I'm right here in Guantanamo. This is a very bad picture in a Guantanamo motel room. And back then it was $12 a night. It's now $90 a night, so nothing gets better here. And this is still going on 21 years later. So at the very beginning, basically it was, the Mississippi State Penitentiary times 100. So instead of giving people a rubbish lawyer at the time of a bad trial, you didn't get any lawyer and you weren't allowed a lawyer, and they created a whole pseudo-legal system down here for military commissions. Instead of putting the penitentiary miles away from anywhere so your family couldn't visit easily and so forth, they put it in Cuba, for goodness sake, where no one could visit. And the general idea was that it should be a total legal black hole. Gradually over the years, and this is a tribute to America. I speak as a British person as well when I say we really need a constitution in Britain, because it was the fact that the right to habeas corpus is enshrined in the original constitution that meant in June of 2004 we were able to prevail in the US Supreme Court and get the right to legal access here. But that only got you so far. And there were 780 prisoners originally in Guantanamo Bay. There are now 35. That means that 745 have left. Of the 35, 20 are cleared for release. That means that 765 have been declared by the United States as no threat to the United States or their coalition partners. And this you've got to compare to Donald Rumsfeld, then Secretary of Defense, saying these are the worst of the worst terrorists in the world.
I had an encounter with the American soldier. It was at the airport, Islamabad airport, which is in Pakistan, in a diplomatic lounge, while I was in shackles. I was hooded, and I was handed out to the American soldiers in return of $5,000. And I was there when the money was, they used to count the money. I could hear them talking money. And this is the first time actually that I've seen or come face to face with the American soldier, when he removed the Pakistani cuffs and put on an American cuffs, and removed the Pakistani hood and put instead an American hood. So Bush put me in Guantanamo in an orange jumpsuit with goggles on, with all the image that everybody is aware of. And he told the American people, here is one of them. Here is He is one of the perpetrators that I've promised you that I'm going to get to justice. It was me. So am I a perpetrator? So I wanted to ask George Bush this question. I want the American people to ask George Bush this question. Me and many others. Are we the perpetrators? Where is the justice?
So, if you agree, Robert and Ron, I'll take advantage to go to Mansour. We got a brief taste of your interview in Robert's film, but take a few minutes. The benefit of our morning programs is we do have time to dig deep into these issues. Take us a little time to help us understand what in the world put you in that abominable place, briefly what that was like, when you were released, and what you've been able to work on since then.
First of all, I would like to welcome you all, and I think Robert computer couldn't handle this kind of event, so it broke down. In 2001, I went on a research mission to Afghanistan. I was a researcher assistant, and that was my only ticket for higher education. When I finished, like I was promised, when I finished my mission, I would get like a scholarship to one of the Gulf countries to finish my higher studies in IT. So I was sold to the CIA as Al-Qaeda commander, 9/11 insider, and the general of the 55th Brigade. I was taken to the black site a few months, tortured in the worst way imaginable way. Before they set the enhanced interrogation technique, there was no boundaries. Of course, like we can spend hours, days talk about it. Then I was transferred to a prison in Kandahar, then to Guantanamo, where I spent around like 15 years. I came from a tribal background, conservative family. My father was the head of the tribe, so I was raised in a way to be the face of the family, to be our families prepare us so we can take over and join the tribe, In Guantanamo, we didn't know where we were or until we were going to stay or what. At the beginning, like we had for 3 months, we had no idea, totally disconnected, isolated from the rest of the world. And you're just talking about isolation and solitary confinement. Basically in Guantanamo, we were isolated. We had no shared life with each other. The only thing we have, what we brought inside our head, knowledge, memories, emotion, relationship, and some of that would start corroded at Guantanamo to disappear, because the most you stay in prison, the more you start constructing a new person, a new you, a new memories, a new relationship, a new knowledge, and everything would be related to this period of time. So I spent around 15 years, around half my life. It's not at Guantanamo, there was like a mark on me. I'm that person who able to move the people. I wasn't. I was behaving like the same was behind my tribe. And my behavior was taken as proof that I'm that kind of person. They have an Egyptian general. That turned to be true, but I became a general at Guantanamo. I became like a detainees leader, instigator, organizing hunger strike, and so on. From 2002 until 2010, I was in solitary confinement. I was in hunger strike, 3 years in force feeding. And in 2010, however, we managed to, after Obama failed to close the detention, we negotiated with the administration for the first time. They sit in tables and shake hands with us. And I laughed at them. I said, finally, now you shake hands, because it's forbidden even to shake hands. Everything was there to break you, to tame you, everything serve under the control of interrogators and interrogation. So we started negotiating with them about improving living condition in the camp because we knew we were not leaving soon. And they told us we had no control over your release, but this is what we have control. So the negotiation, we negotiated, you know, we negotiated communal living, better healthcare, better food, family communication, classes, most important, yeah, classes, TVs, newspaper, police station, refrigerator, microwave, stopping the torture, the interrogation, stopping the ones with them, stopping the torture. I like Americans, you know. In a matter of 2 months, everything changed upside down. You know, yesterday they called me the terrorist. Today, how are you, sir? Good morning, sir. So, the interrogation actually that was like bring the FC team, ERF team or immediate reaction force, 6-7 guys in protective gear that would come and drag us and beat us. You know, then they changed the interrogation room, become like a guest room. There was couch, TVs, refrigerators, PS3. And if you go to the interrogation room, you would get like $3 a month, not as money, but as incentive. And I said, you know what? I need to see the room. I went there and there was like a female interrogator. Hey, nice to see you, 441. I said, nice to see you too. Smile, please. And they frame my hand. They shackled 1 feet to the ground. I was laughing so hard. The head of interrogation said, 441, you have to stop playing. I said, I'm not. Yesterday, you were kicking my ass. You stripped me naked and all that things. Now, sir, and like food. What's wrong with you guys? Yesterday, we were terrorists. You are not. So basically in 2010, 2013, we go to the golden age. And that I start working myself, you know, start learning English, start writing, start also teaching others as much as I can. So I start writing a book, Moments from Guantanamo, the initial draft. In 2013 was confiscated by the FBI. So, and the army took over, and again they shut down the communal living. We went on hunger strike again. I was on the force feeding, and I almost died. I was taken to the intensive care unit for 3 days because I was on hunger strike for 70 days only on water, and I almost died. So hunger strike is another story. And we start creating art from Guantanamo. Basically, art's another story. It just let you know, even the art journey in 2017, Trump administration, when we exhibited the first art exhibition in New York, they banned art from leaving Guantanamo. So we had to fight until 22. We had to like protest, sending letters, writing articles, interviews. I sent a letter on behalf of former Guantanamo detainees to Biden administration, to the DOD. Then we contacted the UN. As you know, they sent a letter to the US government. So the ban was lifted last year in October, and they said detainees were allowed to take a practicable amount. So we managed, alhamdulillah, one of the victories we did. I published my book in 2021. It was Don't Forget Us Here, and Don't Forget Us Here. These were the last words of my brothers at Guantanamo, my last night before they dragged me to the airplane. So I told them I promise I won't, and I hope I'm keeping my promise. We published the book, and since I was released, I started doing activism, interviews, writing, and now I work with Cage as Guantanamo project coordinator. I work with the Normal Guantanamo, Witness Against Torture, Close Guantanamo Coalition, Guantanamo Survivors Fund. I do a lot of, you know, speaking engagement, writing. Now I work on. I work on sign a contract with Amazon, an audio book, Letters from Guantanamo. Also, I am working on my new book, Life After Guantanamo, because Guantanamo hasn't looked at us yet. Also, we are developing a TV show from Guantanamo with love, and we prepared the pilot, and I hope we can manage to do it. So yeah, this is the project I'm working on now. And also I work as, even for the released prisoner from Guantanamo, I'm tracking their cases, bringing to the lawyers to contact State Department, because, you know, being released in Guantanamo, that doesn't mean you're free. There is cases where people died, where people still in prison, where people sentenced to death. And, you know, where people literally live in limbo, no legal status. One of the cases I'm working on now, the last released from Guantanamo, the Algerian, and he was released to Algeria as a free man after 21 years. Algerian government imprisoned him. They cut his hair, his beard. They threw him to prison because he told the judge. The judge told him, "You are going to be stripped of your civil right," and he told him, "Send him back to Guantanamo." They sent him to jail. So I started contacting the lawyers, contacted the department, contacted the UN. Now he has been in jail for 2 months, like 21 years without charge, without rights to Algeria, and they came to have like a new accusation against him, which even American didn't bring it, So this is life after Guantanamo, and also one of my goal, like I'm working on like closing Guantanamo, and this is really important because when I say closing Guantanamo means U.S. government must acknowledge what happened there. We ask for official apology, reparation, and accountability. Without these, we cannot say Guantanamo is closed and the Guantanamo chapter is closed, because without accountability, there is no guarantee that Guantanamo will be created outside or inside the United States. And without accountability, we cannot guarantee that torture will be happen again. And as you know, Ron DeSantis, he was in Guantanamo, and he was one of the main leading voices against the closure of Guantanamo. So far, in my level life, alhamdulillah, I just get my passport after 6 years and managed to go to Oslo. And my first trip in my life ended to Guantanamo, and my second trip in my life for the closure, I traveled to fight for the closure of Guantanamo. So this is, I hope I managed to give you some briefing about my story and so on. And sorry, I have to run to another meeting, but yeah, thank you so much.
I want to say one thing in here that what was really important in what you shared with me, Mansour, before, was that most of the people who are helping the former detainees to deal with and bring accountability are Americans. And I think that's a tribute to the people in this group. We've been carrying this torch alone for a long time here in the United States, but we understand that our commitment has been making a difference. And I think that hearing that from Mansour, who has communicated that also to other former detainees, that yes, in fact, yeah, America did create this monster, but it's also Americans who are working the hardest right now to fix it. So I want to share that with everyone here, because I think
I would like, let me say that again. When we get out, like our own countries abandoned us. Our own countries, I'm telling you, Yemeni president, he know about personally my case, another case, because when I left Yemen, I had approval from the government. The head of Yemeni intelligence himself came to Guantanamo. He told Americans, we know Mansour. He has an official approval to go to Guantanamo, because, I was working for one of the institute that funded by the Saudi intelligence. It was the Saudi front, basically. I came to know that later on, anyway. So our countries abandoned us. Even I don't see any country that called for the closure of Guantanamo. I don't see any Arab countries or Muslim countries. This is a reality. So we found ourselves, like most of my friends from the United States, and the one who helped me to get the book, the campaign, and people I work with about Guantanamo, all Americans. And don't be surprised, the leading people for the call for the closure of Guantanamo against torture are Americans. And, that's completely changed our view about Americans and American. That happened also in Guantanamo, started in Guantanamo, but after Guantanamo, especially when you started how Guantanamo Survivors Fund, it was based on my bachelor. Yeah, I finished my bachelor degree in 2021. My thesis was about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees into social life of the labor market. Based on that, we established a program called Guantanamo Survivors Fund. We raise money and send it to those who have like difficulties, medical health, or they have like legal issues. Now I am working my master degree. My thesis will be about closing Guantanamo. So yeah, most of my support and help came from the Americans, and I appreciate that. And my second mother in the United States, my lawyer, Aunt Pat Jacob. Thank you all. Actually, you are part of the team.
Thank you, Mansour, and we understand if you have to leave us. Robert, we interrupted, or
Okay.
you interrupted yourself.
Bye.
Be well, be safe, Mansour. And I put the name of his book in the chat. Robert, did you have more you wanted to present?
There's probably another 10 minutes of that reel that's edited that I could share now if there's time, if time allows, or we could move on. I mean, it's up to you.
No, let's get the last 10 minutes of your work.
Loans. While I was in shackles, I was hooded, and I was handed out to the American soldiers in return of $5,000. And I was there when the money was, they used to count the money. I could hear them talking money. And this is the first time actually that I've seen or come face to face with the American soldier. When he removed the Pakistani cuffs and put on an American cuffs and removed the Pakistani hood and put instead an American hood. So Bush put me in Guantanamo in an orange jumpsuit with goggles on, with all the image that everybody is aware of, and he told the American people, "Here is one of them. Here is one of the perpetrators that I've promised you that I'm going to get to justice." It was me. So am I a perpetrator? So I wanted to ask George Bush this question. I want the American people to ask George Bush this question. Me and many others. Are we the perpetrators? Where is the justice? So the bottom line is, it was a political con orchestrated by George Bush because he wanted to show that the job is done. So he paid $5,000 for each Arab who was in Pakistan at that time. He handed money to the Pakistani authorities, and he got hundreds of people, dressed them in orange uniform in Guantanamo, and all the media, showing these people wearing orange uniform with the beard and so on, and people are terrified, thinking this is the terrorists, this is the worst of the worst, and I'm one of them in that case.
So we are talking about now 21 years. Some of the prisoners, like 35 prisoners still there, 21 of them have been cleared for release. Some of them, believe it or not, have been cleared in 2010. Imagine 11 years waiting to be released. 11 years. Those men were never charged and never tried.
In talking with Ahmed, he said something really, really important. So many things, but what was really, poignant to me was him commenting on, yes, I'm a victim, but you know what? So are the American soldiers who are the guards or victims. He sees them as victims as much as himself. What do you think about that?
If you read my book, you will find it there. When I said Guantanamo was a machine, and as prisoners, we weren't just the victims. There are also those soldiers, camp staff, those people who are weak to stand for their humanity and for what's right. And some of the guards, some of the camp staff, they were punished for even sympathize with the prisoners. I remember, for example, one of the examples, in 2003, we had a Muslim chaplain, an army captain, James Yee, who came to Guantanamo to serve as Muslim chaplain for prisoners and guards. So by the end of 2002, General Jeffrey Miller arrived, and he started you know, developing what they call enhanced interrogation technique and experimenting on prisoners. So when Jamsi protested against the torture and abuses, as an army captain, he was arrested and detained and charged and classified to be like enemy combatant, just like us. I'm talking about the American army captain who came to Guantanamo to serve his own country. Imagine if they did this to their own citizen. The system at Guantanamo that was created, it was created, as I told you, outside of the humanity.
I don't just want to end Guantanamo, I want to end detentions, all right? I don't want to end Guantanamo, I want to end bombings, all right? Just last year, in Syria and in Iraq, there were 299 operations in just those two countries, not to mention anything about Afghanistan, Somalia, Niger, or any other countries. I don't just want to end Guantanamo, I want to end bombings. I don't just want to end Guantanamo, I want to end suffering. And I don't just want to end Guantanamo, I want to end the wars. That's what I want. And here's the thing, I don't just want to end the wars.
This past January 11th was, I believe, the 12th time that interfaith communities united for justice and peace gathered in front of the downtown Los Angeles Federal Building to hold a vigil consisting of kneeling detainees in orange suits and orange jumpsuits and black hoods. We had a number of very distinguished speakers. And we do it in front of the downtown Los Angeles Federal Building to call attention to our government's crimes against the U.S. Constitution and humanity. And we call on them to close this facility. Obviously, they haven't been listening to us with rapt attention, but we feel the need to continue to do this. Guantanamo is emblematic of 5 issues. Kidnapping, or as the U.S. government cheerfully refers to it, extraordinary rendition, arrest without charges, imprisonment without trial, torture, and murder. Inasmuch as we like to think of ourselves as a constitutional republic, Guantanamo is a transgression against all of these core issues. It's a transgression against the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, against Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, against the UN Convention Against Torture, and against the U.S. torture statute.
My question of how is, how do we each use the awesome privileges of American citizenship to end this blight on our nation? Constitution signer James Wilson suggests it is the duty of each and every citizen to use our best and most unremitting endeavors for preserving the Constitution, noting the efforts of each and every one of us is important to this cause. My last question is what? What is each person here watching on live stream or watching this recorded going to use your awesome power to do to help protect our Constitution by restoring justice to the place, the people, and the families our government has denied it to these 21 long years. Thank you.
98% of the people who fight for the human rights, fight for against Guantanamo, are Americans. And now, American media, activism, NGOs, people like Yeah, and I really thank those people. Even at Guantanamo, like I used to send them letters. If you look at Arab countries, our people, they don't care. So honestly, Americans, like, I told my my brothers at Guantanamo sent letters. I said, you know, the people who fight for you are Americans, because there is a silence from the international community. Our countries, they don't care, honestly, government, because interest, because, you know, they don't want to matter. But I can tell you, like, now our publication, campaign, supporting, it's all came from the United States, which is, it's a healthy thing. And I think we do not judge Americans by the handful who abuse us or torture us. Never, because we know that's not America. You know, here's the thing. At the beginning, when we were at Guantanamo, you know, as I wrote in my book, that America looked at us through the 9/11 scope, and we look at them through Guantanamo scope, because that's what we knew about the time. Then when we come to know more about America and about talking to the guard, meeting nice people, lawyers, and so on, reading, this is not America. This is not what it's about. It's a handful, and they don't represent the value of Americans. They represent themselves, their own interest. They actually misuse and abuse the power. That's what happened here. Imagine, like, when Trump came, he said, we'll keep Guantanamo open. I'm like, person, based on what? It just, because he wants to. So can you judge all Americans by that? No, we can't. And I really appreciate and I'm thankful for American people who still, you know, helping us, supporting us, including you and your friend, your colleague, and so on. And I'm so amazed, honestly.
One of the detainees I interviewed 2 months ago now, Mansour Adefi,
yes,
said that it was an amazing perspective. He said that the people who are helping the former prisoners of Guantanamo most are Americans. Think about that, and what does that make you feel when you realize that there's still a core of people in this country who are standing up for what is right?
I find it moving and surprising, quite honestly. It's Americans, very powerful Americans, who created this mess, and so I'm quite pleased to hear that, you know, that there are others who are, you know, fighting to overturn it.
So I don't want us to leave here feeling helpless, like this is out of our hands. This is absolutely in our hands. We can make and influence change by changing who the people are that are sitting in these seats of power and that are making these decisions for us. These are hard decisions to make.
It's important for us to bear witness, to say this is still going on, to say it's a travesty of justice. It's offensive to me when our government postures as being this Knight Templar of human rights and all that is good and just and decent in the world, when it engages in these crimes that would make any tin pot dictator gag.
U.S. government, the State Department, annually, every year, they have this so-called annual human rights report, which is shamelessly, you know, it's a joke. It's a joke. I know these people, I don't know who they think they're talking to. You know, they have no shame. You know, they think that the rest of the world are dumb. You know, how can you criticize all the governments around the world and question their way of dealing, question their human rights record, and turning a blind eye on your own record in Guantanamo? They are criticizing the rest of the world and ignoring, turning a blind eye on Guantanamo and turning a blind eye on Assange. You know, where Assange, where do you put Assange, Julian Assange, where do you put him? Why do you want to put him on trial? Why do you want to put him in prison for the rest of his life? Why? Because he wants to let the public know about the wrongdoing of the government? This is all he wants to do.
What happened to Assange being like indefinitely in prison? It is like it is Guantanamo, but in another place with new flavor. It just, like as I told you, Guantanamo is now everywhere because people label as, it is enough to be like a suspected terrorist, and you will be in prison, you will be tortured, you will be like, you have no rights. You know, what the crime that woman committed, that man committed? What is his crime? If you believe in justice, charge him, try him. You know, as simple as that. It's to be handed over to the United States for what? It is, what has he done? What is his crime? We need to see the people who commit crime in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Abu Ghraib, in other places. If we talk about justice, war criminals who, you know, was a cause of death of hundreds of thousands, millions displaced, people were tortured, abused, and so on. Then we can talk about justice. We talk about individual because Assange become a symbol. It's not about just Assange himself, it is what he represents, you know, as a person. And that's what scares them. When people start speaking out, exposing because to fight the injustice, you have to expose the injustice, as Assange said. And that's what he did. What he did, exposing the injustice that have been there. Something is wrong, something must be done. Because exposing the injustice means there will be people held accountable, there will be like justice, and people get punished or sentenced, and they will protect themselves no matter what.
Thank you, Robert. Just extraordinary piece of work. I love the new thought. We often say in our death penalty work and elsewhere, don't judge someone by the worst moment in their lives. And for Mansour to have the decency and the humanity to recognize the work of Americans, and we have them right here on our screen, and to recognize, but I'm pausing for myself that we can only say those words, don't judge us by the worst we've done, if we are doing the work to stop it. Then we can celebrate what Americans are doing to end this form of torture.
We all know that here, but we've been seeing it, you know, over the years. Clearly, Guantanamo represents the point of the spear of the American judicial system. I mean, it's exported now worldwide. It is I don't have the words for this abomination that the prison system in the United States has become, to the point where it's an export of what we do. And I think the unity that comes out of our conversations, to have Mansour and the range of people participating together, speaks to the truth that we have, that we need to carry this message forward to really affect change. And Ron, I mean, what you're doing is amazing all these years. I think, geez, thank God that you're doing what you do.
Absolutely. Anthony, you had a question or a comment?
Yes. I first of all, I want to echo what was just said. I just was really impressed with the film, with the work that Ron is doing, especially linking solitary confinement with what's happening in Guantanamo. I'm so glad that we're making progress on it. We have a long way to go. I think one of the things that really struck me was Mansour's comment about the guards being, so to speak, morally damaged by the work that they've done, or and I was wondering if any prison guards or guards in Guantanamo have, so to speak, seen the light and spoken out about how this affected them and how they've maybe perhaps taken a different view because of whatever. It just strikes me that those guards, what happens when they go home after they've been doing these things that are so contrary to, the values that we grow up with? It sounds like moral injury on steroids. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think we see it. We see it in our own legal system here. Prison guards, highest drug abuse rate, physical abuse, domestic abuse, alcoholism. It's a moral destruction that this system is creating on both sides of the injustice equation. And that's clear. We know that. So we can only imagine soldiers coming back from Iraq, and Afghanistan, and what the crimes that they've been committing. It's just unbelievable. So we have that is the war comes home now, right. And we're seeing the results of that, and toxifying our entire society.
Yeah, it's not. I get that, and I know that that's happening. But I'm just thinking, like Vets for Peace and other groups that have come back and had a change of heart and have become the most effective spokespersons for the peace movement. I wonder if anything comparable has happened with guards coming back.
Maybe Rob.
Any of those people, come together to speak out against what happened in Guantanamo? Has that happened?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it could be difficult with Guantanamo. I Captain Yee's book talks a lot about what you're speaking to, but there's not a lot of him out there.
Yeah.
Frankly, there is a little bit more that you hear glimpses of now and then from folks who are in the U.S. prisons who've been damaged. But there again, you have very few of them working through their unions and other places to try to enforce this notion that something that they all know, that this is a place, as Robert described, where you're going to die sooner than your neighbor who's not in that situation. You're going to have bigger problems with alcoholism and domestic abuse, et cetera. So I was even at, it was really an undisclosed meeting with some union leaders who say, look, we're fighting to try to get our retirement rates lowered because our retirement age lowered because our folks don't live as long, and we know that. And so they're missing out on their retirement benefits. Those are the kind of things that cannot be said publicly yet. There's still a huge, I would say, a cap, just a cone of silence around this horrible fact. In fact, I think people do know more about the trauma of solitary survivors, 10 times more right now than they do about the trauma of the people working inside. And you can only blame their own leadership in the unions and the institutional violence that they experience as being part of this violent institution. That's the only thing you can blame, because everybody knows that this is true, including them.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I would kind of expand that. I mean, obviously they're the most extreme, but I mean, once you're in a position of authority where brutal things are kind of accepted, I'm thinking of border guards. And also in my kind of work with the homeless, a fairly high percentage of those kind of young middle-aged have PTSD, and their stories are kind of similar, why they're homeless. It's not just that. Anyway, anybody else put their hands up? Yes, Steve.
Thank you. I just wanted to gather up a few thoughts. First of all, I'm so pleased that Julian Assange was recognized toward the end of your film, Robert, and that the detainees see a deep connection with him. Mansour has such a talent for words. I wrote down, the new flavor of Guantanamo is Julian Assange. And I think we have to recognize that. And therefore, I was glad to see Vinny DiStefano at the January Closed Guantanamo event. And I know he spoke and connected Julian to that. I'm grateful that you had a full interview with John Crampner in the program. We have to mention John, who's been a stalwart in organizing every single year of these closed Guantanamo events. I would bet that it was only a conflict in time that John is not able to join us this morning. I want to tell Ron, and you would expect this anyway, that you have a full partner at ICUJP in the California Mandela Act and in Cori Bush's work on the federal level. So offline, let's get even more focused and organized so that ICUJP and every one of our constituent organizations can push out support for both of those pieces of legislation. It would make a huge difference to see both of those passed. And please know that we are standing shoulder to shoulder with you on that work. And I appreciate everything you're doing every day, Ron. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, when I worked for the probation department, I had about a 10-month period, and I only stayed with it because they wouldn't pass me on probation because I was deaf in one ear. So I stayed until I could pass probation. And one of the things that I did I was a guard. I mean, I was a probation officer, but I was a guard. You had to lock them up in their room if they didn't cooperate. And I never, ever had to do that. But my supervisor said, well, you have not established yourself as an authority. So here's the experiment we're going to do. And he had me announce, everybody line up at the door. And if you don't get there on time, you won't be able to go to the party tonight, and you will be locked in your room. That was how I was supposed to train them. And shortly after that, I did march into the district director and get out. But he said, maybe you need to be a social worker. So I switched gears. But I'm just saying, it started, this was back in '68. It's a long time ago. But I think it starts in juvenile hall. We called the men if there was any violence against staff, and they beat the kids. I mean, this was the response. So I think I'm hoping it's improved, but that kind of training goes on in the juvenile hall even. So people are getting jobs to do that, and they're willing to try things like that because that's how they keep their job. And they drink every night, heavily. We all went to a bar at 10 o'clock at night.
Of course. It's this. I think what we miss, everyone misses, is the scale of the exportation of this culture of incarceration. I mean, we've spread this far and wide. It's ubiquitous in this country. And as Mansour talks about, I mean, it's everywhere. You know, there are prisons everywhere. These Black prisons are everywhere. Our allies, Saudi Arabia, you know, what's going on there? You know, Israel, what are they doing to the Palestinians there? All these kinds of detention and torture facilities are ubiquitous around the world right now. Well, it's an unbelievable realization when you start to put this together. It's just not about Guantanamo. It's about all of this. I mean, it's scary.
Say again, Maggie.
I said punishment does not work in the long run.
Well,
I was saying that's Robert's next film, and we should work with NARCAD and seek outside funding and let you go around the world to film that and the detainees that have been released and others. It is a global, and we are the exporters. We are the architects of that, and we bear full moral and legal responsibility.
You know, there's another aspect to what was not in this piece right now. Ahmed, you know, really lays out the Ukrainian hypocrisy. I mean, we're all, oh my God, what Putin is doing, which is horrible, but we're critiquing Putin for doing a fraction of what we did for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, and he speaks to that in the cut right now, but it's like, come on, who do you think we are, stupid? It's like, how can you not? We're shameless in this whole thing. It's look at what we're doing, and you're trying to pretend like you're carrying the flag of righteousness. Come on, I mean, Biden, give me a freaking break. You've been on the freaking, you know, Senate intelligence or Senate committee, war this, war that, forever. You know, let's take responsibility for this. That's what needs to happen.
Carol Francis is waving, and she's posted her hand.
She's unmuting herself. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the hypocrisy of criticizing Russia and not the US for Iraq. How about Vietnam, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Iran, and the Mossadegh, Guatemala,
And Central Jail,
Angola? I mean, like, the United States has no right to criticize anybody for human rights. And if you're doing a movie on prisons across the world, do something, have it end up with the countries that are doing things differently. In Michael Moore's Who to Invade Next, he talks about countries that are, you know, just total different approach. Like, it's not about punishment, it's about rehabilitation, and it's how you rehabilitate people.
Yeah. Anthony, oh no, Anthony's taking his hand down, yeah. Actually, just a quick note on that one. When I was in England and I did my master's degree, which involved a lot of this stuff, we were taught the 3 R's of the criminal justice system. And I thought that was true the world over: retribution, restitution, and rehabilitation. And that was what underpinned it. I don't think it underpins it here, unfortunately. Anthony, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just announcing that we have Making Housing Community Happen have 2 events coming up. One is a Zoom event on Tuesday, June 27th, and that's focusing on dispelling myths and providing solutions when it comes to homelessness and affordable housing. And we've got 2 outstanding affordable housing developers who are going to speak at our event. And then on July 15th, we're having an affordable housing bus tour. We've chartered a 57-passenger tour bus, and we're going to go around to 10 different sites in Pasadena where there are different kinds of affordable housing, including the Salvation Army Hope Center, which is just opening up this summer, 65 units, 65 studio apartments for people experiencing homelessness. It's a beautiful place. We just visited it yesterday. So if you're interested in affordable housing, you want to see what it really is about, I really highly recommend the affordable housing bus tour that we're organizing for July 15th. I'll send you information about it. It's in the chat.
I'll be in your neighborhood is probably the best way I can describe it. I'll be July 7th and 8th. I'll be at Cal State Fullerton, where Dolores Canales and the California Families Against Solitary Survivors are bringing together families organizers, survivors who were part of the push on that historic hunger strike that happened 10 years ago, where 30,000 people inside the California state prison system all went on a hunger strike, protested. And that's always one of the most amazing stories, how people in solitary confinement can organize a statewide strike that gets that many people involved, but they did it. And so I'll be there with the legal strategists, folks who've done the work during the strike, after the strike. NERCAT was very involved. I know you all were in pushing this out, that we need to be supporting these hunger strikers. And a lot of good things have come from it, but of course, a lot of good things have not come from it yet. So in addition to honoring the courage really of the hunger strikers, we're going to be putting our heads together about how do we continue to move the ball forward in California. So it'll be really nice to be out there and set foot in California. It's been a while. But let's close it out. And I'm so glad you mentioned the event with George, honoring George Regas. And I just want us to take a moment to take a deep breath and lift up our prayers to God, Allah, the Great Spirit, Yahweh. Lift up our prayers for the ancestors who've gone before us, for those who fought for peace and justice, who fought for racial justice, racial reconciliation and healing, the giants of justice upon whose strong shoulders we all stand. And may we be those ancestors for the generations to come, and I think we are. We pray for our colleagues who could not be with us. We pray for the interfaith work of ICUJP, of this community, for each and every one of us who've been faithful on these Friday mornings for 20-some years. We lift up our prayers for everyone in our nation's capital who's trying to fight this fight at the national level and anywhere in this country. We know those who are in prison, those who are in Guantanamo, face uncertainty every day, every morning when they wake up, where their safety is not assured, where they're in a very violent institution, and in some cases where that violence is being encouraged by the highest offices of the land. We pray for their safety and their protection, and we ask God to bring a blessing on them. We know in the end that it is our God who will rebuke violence and that justice will prevail. We've been promised that. Justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We depart now from each other virtually, knowing that we are in good hands by recognizing the divine in each one of us. And in the name of love, justice, and mercy, may the people say amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rose, for facilitating. Thank you, Rick, for kicking this off with a superb reflection. What is our program next week, Rick?
Our program next week is, we're going to hear from Sonali Kolhatkar, who was with KPFK for a long time. She's still doing broadcasting and journalism with Rising Up with Sonali. She has a new book, and she's going to be talking about it. So I hope all of you can join us. And yeah, like Steve says, you're all card-carrying members, the new ones here of ICUJP. So that gets you free access. But tip on your way out.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ron. Travel safely. And everybody else, please be well and be safe. Thank you.